and welcome to episode 68 of Book Writing Tips, quick tips for new and seasoned authors, and I am your host, Alba Arango. In today's episode, I'm going to be going over some advantages of reading your manuscript out loud. Now, if you follow me at all on social media, then you'll note that that is literally what I am in the process of doing for my latest book. And it is, for me, the last thing I do before I send it off to the editor. However, it is very time consuming. And so I can understand why people choose to kind of skip that step before submitting to their editor. But if you stay tuned, I'm hopefully going to give you some of the reasons why I think it's really advantageous to read your manuscript out loud to yourself before you submit to an editor. Alrighty then. Today's episode will be in two parts as always. In part one, I want to go over what some of the technical advantages are of reading your manuscript out loud. And then in part two, I want to go over more of like the creative aspects of why it kind of can help to read your story out loud to yourself. So let's get down to it. Part one, what are some technical advantages of reading your story out loud? To begin with, let me just start by saying reading out loud forces you to slow down. Like you read aloud much more slowly than you read to yourself. And the advantage to that, over encompassing the advantage to that, is that it forces you to kind of look at every single word instead of kind of breezing through it. Because at this point in time, once you've like gone over editing your manuscript, you kind of already know what it's going to say, and you do kind of tend to skim over things. So let's talk about when you slow it down and you read it out loud to yourself, what are some of the technical things that you might notice and that I have been noticing in my own book right now because I'm in the middle of doing this from reading out loud. All right, first thing, you'll be surprised maybe, or maybe you're not. Maybe this isn't you, but this is definitely me, at punctuation errors. So it's funny, like sometimes, because when you revise, when you go through and you do edits, you change things around. Sometimes you started things off in a different place and then you got rid of the period and added a comma. And sometimes you forget to get rid of the period. So you've got a period, comma. And because you've read it so many times, you sometimes don't notice that. Or you don't notice that you left off an end quotation mark. I mean, these are just little tiny technical things that of course an editor is going to catch. But of course you want there to be as few errors as possible. And if you don't have an editor, then this would definitely be an important step for you because you catch a lot more of these when you read out loud because it slows you down and you see everything, in my opinion, more clearly because you have to read out loud and you read slower. Now, there's other things. Things like, I know I just saw this yesterday when I was doing my read out louds. I probably, in one of my revisions, had started a sentence with the word pulling or pulled or something, probably pulling, and then I changed the sentence. And so I changed it, and now it says Steve pulled blah, 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 blah. And the P was still capital and pulled. And of course, my writing software didn't catch it because in their mind, Steve pulled was probably his name. So they didn't tell me that the P shouldn't have been capitalized anymore. But these are things you will probably more likely notice when you read it out loud. All right. Another thing, the word but. 1T. The word but does not require a comma, but it can have a comma. It all depends on you, the author. Do you want your character or the narrator to pause or not pause? So for example, if the sentence is, but that doesn't make sense. It all depends on how your character is saying it and how you want your character to say it. And you'll notice it more when you read it out loud. Like when you read it out loud, did you say, but that doesn't make sense? Well, it kind of all run on together, then you wouldn't want a comma. But if when you read it out loud, you said, but that doesn't make sense. Like they were thinking about it and then they said, but, and they paused for a second and then did it, then you would want a comma. And that's one of those things you may not notice when you're just reading it silently, but when you're hearing it read, even just to yourself, you'll be more likely to notice if you want to put a pause there or not. So you would decide if you want to put a comma there or not, because no writing software, probably not even an editor, is going to make that right or wrong because it's not grammatically right or wrong either way. So it just depends on you as the author if you want the character to be pausing after they say but or not. So that's one of the things you kind of tend to notice as you are reading aloud that you may not notice if you're reading it silently to yourself. All right, another technical thing, and this is one I am so guilty of, and that is repetitive words. Oh, and if you listen to my podcast episode, Revision Roadmap, you know that one of the things I actually search for are words I tend to use over and over again, like the word look. And yes, I know my kids are, solving mysteries, so they look at a lot of stuff. But sometimes I'm like, okay, there's like 3 looks in this one paragraph. Like, that's a little too much. So I know certain words that I tend to overuse, and I'll do a search for them, and that's fine. But yesterday, when I was doing my read alouds, I didn't realize that because the kids are at a carnival, I used the word carnival a lot. I used it 4 times in 2 paragraphs. And I was like reading and my paragraphs are short. I write kids books. And it was like the carnival, the carnival, the carnival, the carnival. And I was like, seriously, that is a little too many carnivals. So I, reworded it a little bit so I could get rid of at least 2 of them. I could get rid of 2 of those carnivals so that it reads a little smoother and not so repetitive because it just sounded like crazy. All right, so repetitive words is something you will notice more often if you are reading it out loud. Okay, another thing, awkward sentences or phrasing. And these are things you don't really notice when you're reading it to yourself, but when you read it out loud, if you're reading it and then you stumble on the words, okay, it could just be that, hey, you're human and you were reading out loud, and yes, you make mistakes and you stumble. But if you read it again and you stumble the exact same way, then the chances are that it's just worded awkwardly. So try maybe rewording it and then reading it out loud a couple times and seeing if it flows smoother. And that way you can kind of get those awkward wording or awkward phrasing out. All right. And you get better wording, better phrasing. And it's not so, it tripped me up when I read it out loud. Because so FYI, people do read books out loud, sometimes in book clubs, sometimes in, just the way they're doing it, or if they're listening to it. If you're going to have it read audibly, you definitely don't want your audible reader to, stumble on words. So all of that is helpful. And one last thing, and I don't usually have a problem with that, but I do write for kids' books, but I know several authors that do have this issue, especially if they write like sci-fi and fantasy, is that it's possible that you use run-on sentences and you may not notice it because you're trying to get so much information in and you're just kind of using comma and then comma and then comma. But when you read it out loud, if you notice that you have to take a breath in the middle of a sentence, then it's probably a good indication that your sentence may be a little too long. And you might find a way to break that sentence up so that it is not this sort of run-on sentence that you didn't notice when you were reading it silently to yourself. Okay, now these are all kind of technical things to look at, physically how the words fit on the page. In part 2, though, I want to get to the more creative part. And before I do that, it's time for the crazy law / writing prompt. And if you are new to the podcast, every week I give you a crazy law, and this is a law that once upon a time was a real law in history, and your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to write a fun short story or a serious short story or any kind of short story or maybe even a novel based on that law. So here we go, this week's crazy law. In Salem, Virginia, it was the law that it was illegal to leave your home without knowing where you were going. Now, I'm sure there was a reason why they actually felt they had to make that a law, but how fun would it be to write a story? You can be very creative about that. Anyway, so there you go. If you want to break from your work in progress, write a story about the law. Okay, here we go. Moving on, part 2, the creative part of this. Now, again, remember that reading out loud makes you slow down and kind of look at every word that you're writing. So let's talk first about rhythm. Now, if you are writing picture books for kids, and you're probably the group that this is really, really the most important. In fact, it is crucial. If you have taken my class at all, like at a writer's conference or anything, you kind of already know this, but if you are writing picture books or board books for kids, they are meant to be read aloud. Like that's like literally their purpose. They're meant to be read aloud to small children. So rhythm is super important for picture books because the way the book is read is how the children perceive the story. And so if you are writing picture books, I know I've already mentioned this if you've taken my class, but I think it's incredibly important not just to have you read it out loud, although that should be step one. It is to have several people read it to you out loud so you can hear how it flows. Now, this can be helpful in any book that you're writing, whether you're writing adult sci-fi or whether you're writing it, having another person read a scene to you, like maybe something you're struggling with, can be a helpful way to get you to visualize the scene and hear how another person is seeing the story. So it can be helpful in that way as well. But again, if you are writing kids' books, picture books specifically, rhythm is crucial. Now, kind of along those same lines, this goes for everyone, is pacing. And that doesn't matter if you're writing nonfiction or fiction. Pacing is really crucial to how your story is read by a new reader. So, for example, if your sentences are really choppy, like you have a bunch of really short sentences like subject verb da da da, 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 it's going to come across as very choppy writing, and it really can take a reader out of the story. Now, an exception to this for sure is if you're writing a fight scene. Fight scenes are meant to be like snap, 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 fast, 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 fast. So short sentences are really good for a fight scene. But unless your entire book is a fight scene, then having only really short sentences all the way through, even for kids' books, is too choppy. It really does not read well aloud. So definitely read it out loud. And if you're noticing that it's just sounding like it's almost robotic, it's so like quick and short and quick and short and quick and short, then maybe try to kind of mix it up a little bit with some longer sentences. Again, even for kids, even for picture books, all right, a little bit of longer sentences can really help with the flow and the pacing. And of course, that's true if you only write really long sentences too. If you only write really long sentences, then it's like it takes your reader's breath away. Like, and that's not in a good way. I don't mean that it's like, wow, so suspenseful. I mean, it's like literally like, it's like sucking the life out of them. And I remember when I was a teacher and I would read essays and these kids would have like a paragraph that is an entire page long, an entire printed page, one paragraph. And you need a break. And I would tell them, you need to break this up. Like it's just too much information, and having that paragraph breaks it up. Having breaks in sentences does the same thing. But again, you need to get that pacing down to you. Of course, every author is different. And maybe for you, writing shorter sentences is how you write. It's your forte. It's what makes the story work for you. And you need to be true to yourself. All right. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. These are just suggestions I'm making, and every writer is different. So if you like the short, choppy sentences all the way through your book, then oh my gosh, keep them. Keep them absolutely. It's your book. You write your book the way you want. These are just, if you read out loud, you can see if you feel like it's working. Because maybe you like writing that way, but when you read it out loud, you realize, maybe it doesn't work as well as I thought. Anyways, these are just ideas to get you going. All right, moving on. This next one is one that I didn't ever even thought of, and I heard an author say it the other day, and I was like, that's really interesting. And it has to do with character consistencies. Now, I have 3 main characters in my book. This is my 9th book in the series. I know them very, very well. But this would be an interesting thing to try, and I haven't done it, with minor characters. And I don't really have any major minor characters in this book, but I have in other books. And now I'm like, wow, I kind of wish I had done this. It would have been interesting to see. And that is that this author said that with her minor characters, these are characters that are not in every scene, not even in every other scene, that maybe only show up every 3rd chapter or 4th chapter, but they're, still throughout the book, is this author takes just those scenes with that minor character and reads those scenes out loud back to back. So she can see if there was consistency in her minor character, or because they're so far apart, did she kind of change the character in between scenes? And I thought, what a brilliant idea. And I've not tried it, but I definitely thinking I will need to do this for my YA book, because I have some characters that are not in every scene that, I should be looking at if they're consistent. And this is something I do want to try. I haven't tried it yet, but I think it sounds like a really good idea. And one last thing because this last thing I want to talk about is dialogue. And there's two things I want to talk about. And one is how the main character talks to different characters. So for example, the way your main character talks to her best friend is going to be different than how she talks to her colleague and then how she talks to her lover. You know, people talk differently to different people, and that's something to think about when you are writing dialogue. That your main character, I mean, you're going to, of course, be true to her, but I mean, she is going to speak differently to different people. If one of your characters is a child, the way they speak to other kids is going to be different than the way they speak to adults. And of course, you're not going to throw F-bombs everywhere, because I know some kids talk like that, but just think about that when you're writing dialogue. Make sure you pay special attention to dialogue. You want it to sound organic and realistic. Is this conversation these two people are having, does it sound, when you hear it out loud, does it sound realistic, the way real people talk to each other? Not the way, AI talks to each other, the way real people talk to each other. They cut each other off. How do real people talk to each other? And you don't want it to sound robotic. Throw some, inflection in there, throw some emotion in there. You want it to sound realistic. And sometimes when you're writing it and you're just reading it on page, you don't hear it. You don't hear the lack of emotion. You don't hear that it sounds robotic. You don't hear that it doesn't really sound organic and realistic. So I think of all the things, dialogue may be the most important thing to read aloud. Now, having said all of this, it really does take a long time to read it out loud. And that is probably the biggest reason why a lot of authors don't do it. And I get it. It can easily, if you're writing fantasy and it's 100,000 words, it can easily take you 2 or 3 weeks to read it out loud, depending on how much time you have. And who has 2 or 3 weeks to do that? Well, hopefully you do. I mean, if any of these things sound like something you may want, and here's an idea, by the way, if you really don't know if this is going to work for you because you're thinking that really is a huge time commitment, just do the first 2 chapters. That's it. Do the first 2 chapters. And in doing so, if you notice that, oh, wow, I did find, this and this and this, then maybe it would be a good idea for you to read the rest of the book out loud. But if you found that, you didn't really find any differences, you didn't really find anything that, you couldn't have fixed by doing it, then maybe you don't need to do it after all. But for me, it really has been advantageous to do the read aloud. And by the way, I do it while I'm walking around my house. I posted that the other day and someone told me, yeah, actors do that too. And I thought, it helps me. It helps me to walk, and then I stop and I write stuff on my page. I have a bright colored pen that I write, and that way I remember to go back and make the changes. But I do it while I walk around. I print it out and do it while I walk around the house. And yesterday I got like 12,000 steps. So you know what? Hey, double advantage, win-win. I got to do some edits and I got to get my walking steps in. So anyways, there you go. Again, take everything with a grain of salt. These are just things that I think are helpful for you. They are helpful for me. They could be helpful for you as well. Don't forget, if you haven't followed, please be sure to follow or subscribe. Give me a like if you'd like. And I drop a new episode every week. So until next week, stay safe, and I will see you all next Wednesday.